All right, artists, for this video, we're gonna be learning how to make a pinch pot. I'm starting off with a chunk of clay that I just took right off of my big block that's in my plastic bag. And the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm going to shape it. So I'm just gonna be using my hands to make this blob into more of a bowl shape. You want it to look like a ball. So I'm just using my hands and compressing it. If I have big cracks like that, I can smooth it a little bit more with my thumb. You want it to be nice and smooth to start, because if you start with a really smooth surface, it's going to make your bowls need a lot less work later on. So I'm rolling it on the table, pushing it with my hands, and the goal is to get a sphere. If I put pressure on one side, I always want to make sure I'm holding on the other side too, because if I just put pressure on one side, I'm going to end up with a dent. And I want to make sure that I'm making this round. So compressing all over is key. You can use your whole hand to help compress. And you'll see it's slowly getting into being more and more of a ball shape. I have a good amount of clay. This is going to make a pretty big pinch pot. The more clay you use, the bigger your pinch pot will be. If you want to work smaller, you can. So right now our clay is in the elastic stage, meaning that it's pretty easy to move in shape. And that's what we want. If your clay is stiff, what you're going to do is put a little bit, like maybe a teaspoon, tablespoon tops of water into your plastic bag and let it sit for a few hours before going back to it. But it's only if it's very, very stiff. Don't add water directly to your clay, because we tend to just wet the outside and the inside doesn't get wet. So I have my ball, it's looking pretty good. And the first step for my pinch pot is to take my thumb and find a good spot. Usually I find the ugliest spot, and I put my thumb in the middle of it. So now my thumb is inside of the clay, and I'm going to take my outside fingers along with my thumb, and I'm going to pinch. And you'll see I started to widen that hole a little bit. I'm going to turn it a little bit and pinch. Turn, pinch, turn, pinch. I'm going to keep on doing that all along my sides and along the bottom. You can see I'm starting to get a heavier bit of clay here, so make sure my fingers reach there, and I'm going to pinch all the way around. So this is the basic type of hand building, and I'm just going to continue with my pinching. When I'm doing that, I am making sure that no parts of my wall are much thicker than the others. You can see I still haven't gone all the way around for this one, so I'm going to go all the way around, and I'm feeling with my fingers here how thick my pot is. You want your clay wall to be about as thick as your pinky, so you can compare. Is it as thick as my pinky? No, it's definitely thicker. So I'm going to keep on pinching. And you want the same thing for the bottom and your walls. While you're doing this, you can also think about what shape you want your pot to be. If you want it to be a tall bowl, if you want it to be wider, as you're shaping it, you can change the actual shape of the dish. For mine, I'm starting to think about it how I want it to be maybe more of a tall like cereal bowl. So I want it to be kind of big, so I use a lot of clay for mine. And just keep in mind, when we go to fire these things, they do get a little bit smaller once they're fired, because there's lots of water in clay. And once that water evaporates out, it will shrink the size of the bowl. I just had a big crack in that, so all I did was just kind of mush it with my finger to eliminate that. You'll see you get cracking towards the ends, and that's from your hands actually taking moisture out of the clay and creating those cracks, but you can just smooth those out. If it's cracking a lot, you can add a little. I literally just dip my finger in water, a little bit of water to help it stay soft. So you're gonna keep on doing that until that you get the shape and the size that you want. If you want to change the shape, you might need to hold it up in the air too. I want to have it not be as flat on the bottom. I can feel any parts that have big chunks of clay. I'm smoothing those out just by squishing. I have like a corner edge here that I want to get rid of. So I'm going to keep pushing those. I'm going to use two hands for this since now it's getting a little bit bigger. In the tools that you guys can make at home, one of the things was a paddle tool, which is just kind of like a flat, you can often use like wooden spoons where you're just kind of tapping. Those are good for this too. I don't have any of those in school, but if you wanted to make those at home, or again, you can get them from the dollar store, you can use those as well. So I'm starting to get my shape. I'm kind of liking the way that this one is looking. So I'm going to go through and start smoothing out things that I like. If you notice your bowl is getting too floppy and it's losing its shape as you're working, you're going to want to let it sit and dry out a little bit. So if I was going to let this sit right now and it was too wet, what would happen is it would start to just kind of droop down, and I don't want that. So what I'm actually going to do for this is I'm going to flip it over and try to get the outside shape the way that I want. And because it's putting weight all the way on the edge, as it sits out, it's going to hold its shape a little bit more. I'm going to let this sit for a little bit to dry out, just a smidgen, and then we'll go back to it in a little bit.